What are your hopes for traditional craft for the future?
Um, I don't think too far in the future.
Mm-hmm.
We'll say immediate future.
Okay.
I think it's important that traditional handcraft, have a place. I don't have any illusions that in the immediate future we're going to have a complete return to traditional hand craftsmanship. But because I think it adds tremendous value
Mm.
to both to the individual and society for it to exist, and it's a type of traditional handcraft is technology. The word technology literally means a technique, craft, logia, knowledge. So it's knowledge of craft. That's what technology is. So this is like literally thousands and thousands and thousands of years of accumulated human know-how. And I think at some point in the future, we're going to need it, quite frankly. Many of these traditional technologies are eminently sustainable. They're local. They're working with materials and getting to know materials intimately, and putting them to practical use in the environment in which they are found. So, although we're able to extract very precious and rare resources at an unprecedented rate in our highly industrialized society, that's not likely to last indefinitely. So the idea of holding on to information for future use, so as to reduce the amount of suffering, is a worthwhile pursuit. So I just think of it this way: it's we know that, for example, like the Greeks and Romans, which are definitely some of the foundational particular cultures that have contributed to Western civilization. We benefited from the fact that even during after the fall of the Roman Empire and the so-called period of Dark Ages, there were ascetic groups, monasteries that were taking manuscripts and they were copying them, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that knowledge was not necessarily in use at that time, but it was recognized that there was value there, and so essentially, in this modern 21st century world, I think the traditional hand craftsman is fulfilling a similar role. He's taking that type of manuscript, as it were, metaphor, of this local handmade know-how, and he's passing it on for one more generation, when actually we'll really need it as human society.
Why do you think it's lost value in modern day society?
Well, I think it's a good question. Why has it lost value? Well, it hasn't lost practical value. It's lost. It's a different value structure. Much of our society today is based on things of instrumental or symbolic value. I mean, money is the most obvious example of that. We all probably been told this, even though it doesn't really sink in so well, that money is just paper or coins or figure that is electronically maintained in a database. So money has very little value that adheres to itself as paper or one of these other mediums. Its value lies in its potential to be converted to something of real value. Food that keeps you fed, keeps you alive, shelter, or maybe other things that we value that are less tangible, like status, for example. It'll get you that fancy watch, or that nice car that will make you be respected by your peers. At least that's the promise. So those things are pointing, money essentially points to something else. It's a symbol that stands in for something else that you would really consider of intrinsic value. Handcraft is not like that. It's the value inheres to itself. So when you're making something, you know, the act of making has an influence on the person doing the making. So it's very personal, it's very individual. They're absorbed in that process, and even that has value. Of course, the object made also has value as well, and those can be bartered for. Modern society, we can give it exchange instrumental value for something that has inherent value.
Do you think that some of the handicrafts that are made are too expensive to afford if they're
Well, that's been the contention, that no one can afford to do this anymore, and handcraft is just not practical. Problem of large numbers, etc. And it's interesting, the societies where handcraft thrives still are the poorest societies in the world, in a certain sense. And they're not poor because they do handcraft. But that's what people exchange, and that's what they have. So it's an interesting way to think about. Let me put it this way: you can think about things a little bit differently. I know right now that that's kind of the idea that because we live in a so-called consumer society, so the object of economics, let's say, is to bring prices down for the consumer, and that entails mass production, factory production, and increasingly automation, so that we have artificial intelligence systems and robots making things. So I do see the problem with large numbers, but I see it from a different perspective. As we're continuing to automate more and more things, there's less and less for people to actually do. So this ability to do and make and cultivate is really being taken away from the human individual. And so by taking that away, you're taking away people's direct involvement in the world and caring for themselves, and so you're actually reducing the amount of meaning that they have. The problem of large numbers is, what do you do with all these people? See, we have a human being is quite incredible, an incredible resource. They can do almost anything, and all you have to give them is food and water. So the problem of large numbers is, what do you do with all these people? And certainly, obviously, cultivation and handicraft were traditional avenues for keeping people busy. I think it's going to be a big problem when we have lots of people and either unemployed or engaged in things that are abstract or not meaningful. I mean, there's certain people that can work in a theoretical framework, and their life is filtered through computers or machines, and they're okay with that. But I don't think it represents the totality or even the majority of human beings. So we're already. I think it's already evident that there are a lot of social problems in the direction that we're moving, with mass unemployment, underemployment, or meaningless employment.
In that, do you think people will return to traditional craft?
I think it's happening on a small scale already.
Yeah.
Like in highly industrialized Western societies. It's happening, but it's happening in a strange way. It's almost like we're able to do this because we're so wealthy. So you can basically do almost anything and and get by. So people are just doing it because they're following their interests, and they're actually bucking the idea to maximize profit. You're going to pursue whatever your aptitudes would yield the most in instrumental value, essentially money, and say, no, I enjoy this, so the society is so wealthy that I can pursue traditional art or traditional craft again, try and create a market for it myself, and and do this heroic effort, and actually get by, not starve to death. I mean, that's a miracle. But there's this kind of disconnect, because I think a lot of times we think of economy on one end of the spectrum and ecology on the other end of the spectrum. Like an economist and an ecologist are like, they have nothing to do with each other. They're at odds with one another philosophically, ideologically. But it's interesting that these are both Greek words. And oikos is where we get the prefix eco from, means the home. But not just a simple house, more like an estate. So, oikosnomia, or economy, was the management. Nomia is like the management, so the management or the administration of the estate. Whereas oikoslogia, or ecology, was knowledge of the estate. And in that context, you can see that these things were actually, they were kind of integrated. They're almost synonyms, really, to one another, which makes sense. So if you're going to be able to administrate or manage your home, Earth being our home, over a long period of time, it takes deep knowledge of that home, of that estate. And I think that's one of the things that traditional craft provides. It's part of that ecology, the human part of that ecology, that makes for long-term economic, administrative stability.
Do you think that in the future, or immediate future, that you won't be able to educate the majority of society to find value in traditional craft, and just eventually just take over to the machine-run society, or artificiality?
Put that question to me again. Yeah, I'm not sure I understood completely.
How these cities are just continuing to grow, and we're losing these small towns that are losing land to developers and those sorts of things. Do you think eventually that machine will eventually take over craft as well, and they will just...
Oh, that's already happened.
Sure.
The world we live in is product of industry. So if you think about it, human beings have been around for a long time. We don't know exactly how long they've been around, but they've been around a good long time. And but our population remained relatively small up until very recently. I forget when we hit the 1 billion mark, but it's probably within the last 150 years, very recently. So two things have happened. We've had a population explosion, and we've had to provide, of course, shelter for all those people and places for them to work as well. And secondly, because of industrialization, we've been able to secure and exploit resources at an unprecedented rate. So yes, we've been building in a traditional way for thousands of years, most of human history, if you look at temporal perspective. But if you look at actually what we've actually built collectively throughout human history, all together, including the modern era, I think we'll find that we have actually built more as a species in a modern industrialized way, even though we've only been doing it for maybe 100 to 150 years, than the entire inventory of the way we built previously. So the idea that, could industry supplant tradition? Oh, that already happened. That has happened. The built environment, the world we live in today, is by and large a modern industrial one, by far. So it's a matter of reclaiming some of our traditional ways of doing things. Are we going to bring forward all that accumulated wisdom of our ancestors and recover it, because it was willfully thrown away, deliberately thrown away, in favor of a progressive reductionist vision of the future.
Do you think recovery is the only way to move forward?
No, I mean we can keep going the path we're trotting now, but I think there's some sensitivity, there's some realization that maybe, just maybe, this is problematic, and I don't think we had that sensation 50, well, particularly 80 or 90 years ago. I mean,
problematic, saying that it's not the way to go, or to continue.
Yeah, well, we're hearing words like sustainability more and more, and depletion of resources, and those aren't conversations we were having 50 years ago. When I would say 40 years ago when I was a kid, but it's pretty rare. And but now it's like, I think it's becoming more and more front and center, and so that's I think that's why you always find the unusual individual, but that's why it's becoming more mainstream, these ideas about recovering our food culture, recovering our craft culture. It's a survival mechanism, essentially.
You want to stop?
Yeah, that's good.